kind of the gatekeepers for the law enforcement profession. If we want the public to trust law enforcement, you know, we have to police ourselves.
Hey, Two Arms fam. Had a great conversation with the chief of police today. A little different content than usual, but man, it was an awesome conversation, and we dug deep into some controversial subjects, and man, it was interesting. I don't want to give away too much. I did give away some of my personal details and a little bit of history. But man, it was an awesome conversation. I'd love to see your replies in the comments. Tell us what you thought about it. Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe so that all of us, more of us, can become part of the Two Arms fam and learn more about our constitutional rights. Let's see what happens.
Hi everyone, I'm your best friend, back in town again.
Hey, Two Arms fam, we are here at the law enforcement facility and courts, it says on the signs anyways, for Sidney, Montana. Old Glory. Ain't she beautiful? She is supposed to be half-mast, though. I might ask somebody while we're in here, you know, why they're not flying at half-mast. Richland County Law and Justice Center is what it says overhead. We're going to check it out and see if they respect our rights while we're here in the public spaces, and let's see how this goes. Richland County Law and Justice Center. Looks like some sheriff's deputies' cars down there. Let's see if we have any unlawful signs right out here. This is a detention facility, no weapons of any kind. Okay. Are allowed past this point. Well, we don't have any kind of weapons on us, except for cameras of mass accountability. Please deposit completed juror questionnaires. In light of recent events, that looks like COVID stuff. They're asking if you're John Keys, notice to visitors, Richland County Justice Courts. City Court, up the stairs and to the left. Stairs and to the right. So it looks like the court facilities are upstairs on both counts. Let's stand here for CWP photo. Bail bonds. And once again, good signage. Authorized entry only. Of course, they want the money. You can get money for a fee and pay the money. Apparently that's the jail phone. We have a detention facility here in this building. Fingerprint appointments if you need fingerprints.
Can I do with anything?
No, I'm just reading the signs.
Okay.
Please make checks payable to fingerprint appointments. Any questions regarding jail and security of the detention center? How you doing?
Good. Can I help you with anything?
Just looking around at all the public spaces and reading the signs on the walls, just doing a little story on Sidney today and checking out the facility.
Sounds good.
Looks like the courtrooms are all upstairs.
Yep.
And is the police department here too, or just sheriff's office?
Police department's here.
Okay, so it's all one, because I noticed the sign said like law enforcement center, and I didn't know if that meant, is highway patrol here as well?
No, they don't have officers.
I'm sorry, are you an officer or?
I'm the chief of police.
Awesome, so your name and badge number, please.
My name's Mark Kraft, and my badge number is 501.
501. Hey, I lived in that area code.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I've had a phone number for like 20 years from Arkansas in the 501 area code.
Okay.
So now I won't forget that.
Yep.
Did the Chief Justice here make an order that on the floors, you know, courts, adjacent hallways, that you cannot record around the courtrooms in this building?
I'm not aware of that, no.
Okay, so if you have just a minute, I would like to ask you a question. An encounter that I had, and it would have been in 2017. I got pulled over downtown Sidney here.
Okay.
By a law enforcement officer. And when he pulled me over, he came to the window and told me that he had realized, I went by him, no plates on the car. He didn't see my temporary in the back window, but once he pulled me over and walked up to the car, he saw that it was posted there. It was nighttime, tinted windows. You know, all SUVs have privacy glass nowadays.
Sure.
Once you approach the window of a vehicle and you realize that you made a mistake, they do have the appropriate, you know, temp tag in the back window. What would the next thing to do be?
Typically, it would be to let the person continue on their way.
Okay. And I'm hoping that that is how it goes now. That is not how it went for me that night. There was nothing abrasive between me and the officer, nothing like that. But he asked me for my ID and insurance and all that anyways. And then he went back to his car and he wrote me a warning.
I see.
And I even asked him on scene, I said, why are you writing me a warning for something you just realized I didn't actually do?
Sure.
And I didn't file a formal complaint. It's not that big of a deal.
Sure.
But I did call and speak with someone back then, you know, to say, hey, this shouldn't go down like this anymore.
Sure.
It seemed to me that maybe the officer needed a justifiable reason for the stop. And that might have been why he made the mistake of doing that. But I was hoping that's not the way we operate now. That's why I wanted to ask that question if we...
No, that's not typically how we operate. Obviously, if the particularized suspicion that justified the officer to make the stop is no longer valid and it's readily recognizable, then there's no reason to continue the stop.
Yeah, and I had no problem with him stopping me. He validly thought I didn't have plates. I get it.
Sure.
But once because he literally walked up the window and said to me what was going on immediately, that I thought you didn't have plates, I didn't see the temp tag first. So I'm like, oh, okay, no big deal.
Sure.
I'm not offended, you're doing your job.
Yeah.
But then he went on to write that warning for me, and I'm like, come on, man, I know you got to justify your stop and your paperwork, but
Sure.
you know, let's not do that to people. It's, you know what I'm saying.
Yep.
I have two questions I typically ask of any law enforcement officer that I encounter. One is, what does the blue line mean to you?
What does the blue line mean to me? To me, I think it represents just the line between order and chaos.
Okay,
And,
fair enough.
And that law enforcement officers are the ones that try to toe that line and
Okay.
just to try to help keep society from, devolving into chaos.
Right. Do you mind if I tell you what my impression of it has been?
Sure.
Okay, so my personal impression as a child growing up, well, I guess my impression now, I'm not going to give my opinion because I'm a journalist, but I grew up in a household. Do you need to take that? I don't want to hold you.
No.
I grew up in a household with loved ones who wore that shield. And originally, back in like the 90s, when I was a kid, that blue line originally meant that the men and women of law enforcement were the thin blue line standing between law-abiding citizenry and the small percentage of actual criminals that create victims. They were the people putting their lives. They are servants, and servants is not a negative term. That's something to be proud of. I have chosen to be this servant to my community, to put my life on the line between, because 90-something%, I would guess, is all law-abiding citizens. And it's a very small percentage that are the actual criminals creating victims out there.
Sure.
And you're part of that thin blue line that stands between those two.
Okay.
That was what I grew up knowing it would mean.
Okay.
Others have had the opinion nowadays, because it's gotten distorted on both sides, that some people see that as like a gang symbol. They're like, because it's viewed as this brotherhood, you know what I mean, of law enforcement. Sure. And them protecting one another. And I'm
Sure.
not saying that that's my opinion. Sure. I'm not confirming nor denying that, but that's some people's opinion.
I can see where people would.
And we want to close that gap and make that known again, what that blue line really meant in the beginning, because it was a beautiful thing when it was first brought about. For sure. And I think that distinction has gotten lost over time on both sides.
Yep.
The other question I like to ask is, you realize everyone takes an oath when you wear a shield. Every man or woman who's ever worn a shield takes an oath to the Constitution, correct?
Absolutely. Okay.
The very first amendment. What are the 5 liberties the First Amendment protects?
It's going to be the freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of assembly.
Hey, you're doing better than most already, man.
Yeah.
So don't feel bad. You're doing good.
Yeah, the other two are they're they're escaping me right at the
Okay.
moment, so.
There's an acronym you can use to remember them. RAPS, R-A-P-P-S. Religion, Assembly, Petition, Press, and Speech.
I'm embarrassed.
No,
As a
that's...
church-going
no.
person and a person of faith that I forgot about religion, so.
Part of the point of what I do as a journalist is education for me and for everyone else I encounter and for all of my audience that watches our content.
Sure.
We're all learning. We can't maintain our rights or ask you to maintain our rights if we don't learn and you don't learn.
Absolutely.
And to the grave, it's a learning experience.
For sure.
But you got 3 of them right out of the gate, and honestly, that is better than most people.
Well,
I've asked a lot of law enforcement officers the same thing, and some of them, speech. That's the one that most people, they remember. I don't know why, but it's just speech.
right.
I would have thought, as you said, religion would be the one that people would remember.
I mean, like I said, I'm embarrassed that.
No, you did great. You got 3 out of 5, man.
So, yeah.
That's better than most law enforcement officers I asked.
Sure.
But Chief
Kraft.
Kraft.
Mark
I mean,
Kraft.
I'll watch this again. I'm terrible with names, though. My name's Paul.
Paul.
It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you,
I
sir.
appreciate you taking a few minutes to talk with us and answer a couple of questions and being kind about it. Oh, I didn't quite get the answer, and I tend to talk too damn much anyways. I was asking if the Chief Justice had made an order about not recording. I don't know if I caught that answer.
I'm not familiar with any sort of.
They would usually post signs somewhere.
Yeah. Again, this is a Richland County facility.
Uh-huh.
Sidney Police Department. We simply have office space here.
Mm-hmm.
The sheriff's office may know something that I don't, but I didn't hear anything.
Now, you're Chief of Police.
Correct.
So you're City PD.
Correct.
Last encounter I had with City PD, I was at a bank and I was having a dispute with them about a check that I needed to cash. It doesn't matter what the dispute was, but nothing crazy. But they decided to call you guys and use you as their personal security.
I see.
And I'm wondering if we're going to continue to do that either, because no one had asked me to leave. There was nothing violent, nothing loud. They just didn't like it that we were having a dispute.
Sure.
And the officer who showed up actually showed up while I was sitting in an office environment with the lady who runs the branch. And I was talking to her. And as I was talking to her, he puts his hand on my shoulder and tells me to be quiet or leave. Like, now wait a minute. If she hasn't asked me to leave, you can't trespass me. And if I'm not doing something criminal, you're not my father. You cannot tell me what volume or decibel I'm supposed to be at. And then when we got outside, he seemed to misunderstand because he was trying to use a catch-all, unruly conduct, because he didn't like my tone, literally, not one swear word.
Sure.
He didn't like my tone or the conversation I was having with the lady as the branch manager. I don't know if he knew her personally. It's a small town, it's possible.
Sure.
But you cannot exercise your authority. And I even asked him, we had a further conversation once we stepped outside, and I tried to remind him that he can't charge me with disorderly conduct or breach of the peace. Yeah, I know. It's okay.
Drop down.
It has a range from like here to here, so I don't worry about it doing that. But it beeping off a second ago. That's why I was like, come on. But that's why you have multiple cameras back each other up when you got to switch, you know.
Sure.
Anyway, but I didn't like the idea that the branch felt that they could use local police as their security when there was not a lawful issue. And like if they had asked me to leave and I was refusing to leave, or we're yelling and cussing at each other and it had gotten to that level, yes, then law enforcement could be involved because there could be a criminal activity going on there.
Sure.
But just because we're having a disagreement, I just don't think we should be spending tax dollars using the local law enforcement as personal security at a bank.
Sure.
And then the officer really should stick to enforcing the law, not opinion, not emotions, not, moral compass. Now, we all have our own moral compass, but that's not enforceable by law. We got to stick to what the laws are. And again, there was no yelling, cussing, anything like that. He just didn't like the way our conversation was going. Mm-hmm. We ended up having a good conversation in the end outside, but we had to kind of agree to disagree on some of the stuff. And so since you're the chief, I was wondering, what's your take on that? Can you enforce something that's not lawfully enforceable, or try to use a catch-all like disorderly conduct or breach of peace or disturbing the peace when someone hasn't fit the literal description of that law?
Yeah, no, I would say no.
Right.
Being a small town, we on the police department, we look at ourselves as community guardians. And, there's most businesses in this area don't have private security. There's not private security companies, that operate or that are, home is Sidney. And so I think some of the businesses just tend to think of us that way. And in a situation like that, I can understand at a bank. I think folks get a little nervous. The employees get a little nervous, and so that's kind of the knee-jerk reaction. As far as enforcing a trespass when in fact the business hasn't trespassed, well, of course not. That's not something that we can do. I think my officers, we're all people, and I try to ensure that our officers receive as much training as possible. Training is not going to cover every single potential scenario that an officer encounters, and more often than not, I think the officers, I don't think there was any ill intent to harass you, I think what they're trying to do is solve a problem or assist in being the resolution to a situation, and maybe trying to use the catch-all as you said, and again, I'm not verifying this happened or not. I'm just gonna take your word for it.
I'm just asking this. It could be a hypothetical, even. Sure. Just asking how that scenario should play out, because you are the leadership.
Right.
And we're all human.
Yep.
And let's say he made a mistake. It wasn't that terrible. He didn't arrest me.
Right.
And he didn't even demand ID in the end. He started to try to, and I cut him back on that one. I'm like, no.
Sure.
But he didn't arrest me. He didn't in the end demand even my ID. And we did have a fairly fruitful and polite conversation in the end.
Sure.
But I'm like, if this is the behavior, if it wasn't me, what if it was someone else who didn't have the control to articulate in a conversation what I did to that officer? Would he have violated my rights and arrested me and, said, well, you're being disorderly? Because that's where he was headed. What if I were somebody else who didn't know my rights and didn't know how to articulate what the law is and, as I'm doing with you or I did with him, then somebody else might have ended up in handcuffs and in your facility here arrested. And it's a big deal to get arrested for a lot of people. A lot of people have never been arrested in their life.
For sure.
And that's even spending the night in jail for some people, that's a big deal.
Simply being placed in handcuffs is a big deal.
Yeah, because you're a human and you are now, you have no defense. It's a violent act.
Yeah. So, as you described it, I would not want my officer to try to enforce anything like that. Any sort of trespass or disorderly conduct type of, based on what you're telling me, doesn't seem like it fit the threshold, it met that threshold.
Right. And obviously he figured that out by the time we were done talking, because he didn't take any of those actions. But it seemed like he was still trying to say that he could if he wanted to, kind of thing. And I'm like, I think you need a little bit better training, and his intent could be great. Like you said, he's human. He can make a mistake. His intent could be good to satisfy all parties and try and diffuse the situation with whatever tools he felt he had available.
Sure.
But you can't abuse your authority on one person in order to protect the other.
Of course.
If you're trying to appease the situation or diffuse it, you know what I mean, or de-escalate. You guys should have regular de-escalation training, I'm sure.
We do.
Right, and it's... You get where I'm going. And of course, I didn't file a formal complaint against him then, and I'm not now. But it's nice to know that you being leadership, again, to all of the law enforcement that you deal with, that, where are you at? Because if you're not there, your officers are certainly not going to be there. So it's good for the community to see and hear that is where your mentality is, that you do want to protect our rights, and that's what you will encourage your officers to do. Just in a generic term, you know what I mean? Because obviously I didn't capture that officer's name and badge number and try and make a formal complaint or get him in trouble, because again, he didn't in the end do anything too terrible. If I'm going to file a formal complaint against an officer, and go the extra route. God forbid, I've never had a lawsuit, and I hope I never do, because that would mean somebody put their hands on me.
Sure.
That's the only way I'm going to do it. You got to put your hands on me. But if you put your hands on me, I mean, that was your choice, and if you did it unlawfully.
Sure.
Because I have been arrested and called the superior officer to the arresting officer and gave the guy a compliment because he was literally doing his job. I was in Williams County over in North Dakota. And in Williams County, if you have a suspended license, you go to jail for 1 hour. I shit you not. But I didn't. My attorney misinformed me and I missed a fee. So I paid it, state's attorney dropped it. It was really no big deal and it was 1 hour. But he had to arrest me, but he went about it very courteously, politely, and professionally. The man was just doing his job. See, I got no problem with that either if he's just doing his job lawfully.
Sure.
You know, that wasn't his choice. But if somebody's putting their hands on people unlawfully, that's kind of where it crosses the line.
For sure.
And I'm sure that you've had incidents like that where you've had to do some retraining or address one of your officers. I hope. How many years have you been on?
15.
Okay, and in that time, how many officers have you had to reprimand-ish? I'm not asking you to sign your name to it, just curiosity. Like 20, 30? I don't know.
20-ish, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe.
Have you ever reported the ill behavior at any point in your career of another officer?
Yeah, in fact, I mean, it's so in Montana, there's the Montana Post Council, Public Safety Officer Standards and Training Council.
Okay.
They're the entity that issues the certificate to law enforcement, dispatchers, detention officers, probation and parole. It's kind of like their license to operate.
Right.
It's their certificate. Montana, the administrative rules of Montana, specifically regarding post, it states certain criteria as to when a law enforcement agency must report basically any situation where post could sanction that officer's certificate based on some sort of misconduct. It dictates when the law enforcement agency has to report that to post. Both prior to being chief and as chief, I've had to report matters to post. Now, most of the time we conduct an administrative investigation, determine what, if any, policies were violated by the officer. Certainly, if it rises to the point of a criminal matter, there's an outside investigation that's on the criminal side. That's really not our side, but yeah, I have had report matters to post. I have had to terminate officers for misconduct. I actually now sit on. I have a seat on that post council. It's 13 officers, 13 individuals. It's a mixture of public, different disciplines within law enforcement. And they're all appointed by the governor.
Yeah.
And I sit on that council now, and I take that role seriously. I mean, we're kind of the gatekeepers for the law enforcement profession. If we want the public to trust law enforcement, we have to police ourselves
Right.
in such a way that we're engendering that trust with the public, and so. Yeah.
I have one last question before I go, and I really appreciate your time standing here talking to us for a few minutes. You said 15 years you've been around, so you've been around long enough to see the transition that you folks have lost, by say you folks, law enforcement in the entire state of Montana has lost their qualified immunity. How has that, if at all, affected the way you operate as law enforcement?
Well, I don't believe we've lost qualified immunity in Montana.
Yeah, Montana does not support qualified immunity anymore. They're one of, I think, 4 states now. Montana does not support qualified immunity anymore.
Okay, well, I can't speak to that.
So you don't know about it.
I'm under the impression that yes, Montana does have qualified immunity.
Probably want to look that up.
Well, I think I do, especially
Yeah.
considering we were in the 9th Circuit. So.
Oh yeah.
From the perspective of if qualified immunity is no longer a protection for Montana law enforcement, I see that as being
I mean, you can literally take your phone out and Google it right now. Just
don't
Google Montana, just Google
as soon as we're done.
states
I will be
with
looking
no
into
qualified immunity. Montana will come up, and I think it's 4 states now,
Well,
and Montana is one of them.
Again, I can't speak to that because I don't know that, but I will look that up. I see that as a huge wet blanket on any sort of recruitment or retention of law enforcement officers. It's hard enough as it is, recruiting and retaining qualified people, finding people that meet the qualifications. And it's not just, are they a citizen? Do they have a high school diploma? We do an extensive background investigation because we want the right people. And I can't speak to every law enforcement agency in the state, but at Sidney, we spend a lot of time making sure that we're finding the right people that can be the right fit. And so losing qualified immunity, I just don't know why folks would put themselves at risk.
True.
To continue in a profession.
But a lot of people in the community see it as a better leash on law enforcement, because now when you're making a decision whether you're going to put your hands on me or not, or arrest me or not, or harm me with violence, you're going to think twice when you know I can come after you, not the department, not the city. Because that's happened a lot of times. I mean, there's thousands of videos, not of you and your department, so I'm not making a direct accusation, just a open statement that it's obvious that law enforcement, at times, certain individuals do abuse their authority in violent ways, up to and including the death of people.
It's happened.
And when you are wearing that badge and that gun, and also multiple other less than lethal weapons, I mean, law enforcement now is geared up almost to military level, if not military level. And they have multiple tools of violence that they carry with them every single day they go out there on the street. And they use those weapons against people sometimes in a way that they shouldn't have, and make poor choices. And the community wants that gap and divide this to close, because we've watched it open and open for years now. So those of us who do want to see that gap close and stop having a separation between law enforcement and the community, how do we close that? If every time, let's say 99% of your officers here are great people, and you got one officer that just decides that he's going to do whatever the hell he or she wants and makes that poor choice, and we can't do anything about it. They're literally still on the force after having taken someone's life. And that has happened. That's not a theory or hypothetical.
I understand that. However, in the scenario that you talk about there, that would not fall under qualified immunity. If an officer operates outside of what another reasonable officer would do, whether it's, in some sort of use of force, that's not covered under qualified immunity. So when officers are bad actors and they are operating outside essentially industry standards as far as their interactions, their uses of force, that's not going to be covered under qualified immunity. However,
but you got to get it not covered. It'll be unless you prove it's not.
Who are operating under the color of law, under policy, under industry standard, however you want to do it. Right. They should be afforded. Now, certain things happen. Bad things happen that are unintentional. There can be bad consequences when an officer has to use force and he's using that legally. When it's being used appropriately, I think that officer should have some measure of protection.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
Right. Well, I think they do. They have but even without qualified immunity, they have the same protections that the rest of us do. That is, you were acting lawfully. If I walk out here in this parking lot and someone walks up to me and punches me in the side of the head and then I beat the hell out of them, I'm going to have some type of what you could call qualified immunity, because it was self-defense. That person walked up to me and punched me in the side of the head. I had the right to use enough force to stop that person from assaulting me. And an officer has the same thing that I do, the same thing that we all do. If what you were doing was lawful and a jury of your peers sees it, that what you were doing was lawful, you're not going to be in trouble for that. It's not going to be criminal. It should be in front of a jury of peers, the same as any one of the rest of us in the community. Divide closes when we are equals. We are not peasants with masters.
For sure.
Okay? The people who we hire to serve us should face the same jury of peers if they commit a violent act as we do.
Yes, if it is outside of, the code of ethics, the policies, use of force policies of the agency and what are considered industry standards, yes, absolutely. As the chief of police, I have an entire department that I'm looking after, and I look at this community is the thing that I'm tasked with protecting, and I have to do that through the officers that I hire. Now, I'm sending my officers out into the wild, so to speak, and they have to make good decisions.
Yeah, freedom is scary. Buckle up.
Yeah, absolutely. They have to make good decisions. However, and they're going to face any number of scenarios.
And you can't prepare for them all.
And people who have good intentions, people who have bad intentions, and obviously I want my officers to do their job, do it within policy, do it ethically, and do it so that the members of this community can be proud of the police force that they have. However, sometimes when the intents are good and the
Sorry, just checking I didn't shut down.
No, that's right.
Because that camera does but it usually beeps and tells me when it's stupid.
But sometimes when people have interactions, so law enforcement and citizens have interactions, sometimes that goes badly, not the intention of the officer, maybe not the intention of either party. But in those situations where the officer is operating legally and placing himself, out there to protect, putting his own jeopardy, his safety and well-being in jeopardy, and he's operating legally, and something bad happens. I don't think every officer should be faced with a trial. And I think that's where...
No, that's not what I meant either.
And that's where I think qualified immunity comes in. It's not broad absolute immunity, for sure. It's in these certain circumstances, in this small qualified box, the officers have some immunity. The officers outside that box, well, you placed yourself outside that box, and so now you have to, deal with the consequences.
But also, you guys shouldn't be investigating yourselves. At the very minimal, it should be, like, if you have an officer who's done wrong here, it should not be your board here locally. It should be a board out of another, district department, not someone who can be friends or relatives or whatever, or even co-workers for years with the man or woman who's done wrong. It should be reviewed by a board of people at minimum. I'm not saying that's the end of it, because the truth is it should be a completely independent board, even when you have qualified immunity, that decides if it applies or not just, because when officers investigate themselves as a whole, by and large in the whole country, many times the court of public opinion has said, you're nuts. How in the hell are you saying that guy did nothing wrong, or gal?
For sure.
I'm not trying to be
not
inclusive, men and women alike,
I agree 100%.
And the public opinion is, what do you mean that we all saw it on video? We watched that man get beaten.
Correct.
And we saw it end to end, unedited, full disclosure. And we watched this right now, currently, as we stand here right now today. There are 14 jailers who work at a prison that beat a man to death in handcuffs. You know that story?
Yes.
Yeah, some auditors that do what I do have shown up there, gone many miles to show up there and ask, why are those 14 people still sitting at home? Because I would be in handcuffs if I so much as touch you wrong right now.
Sure.
And there's literally video of 14 of them beating a man in handcuffs.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
I
They should be in jail. Or at least based on the video, the
That's-
most
yeah.
forward actors of it, because I'm sure out of 14 people, it's hard to get, if you've ever been in a fight, it's hard to get 14 people on top of one guy at once. There had to be primary actors, and the video will show that. But at least 2 or 3 of the primary actors in that should be in handcuffs, right? None of them, not one of them has gone to jail yet. They're all still sitting at home with their families. You get what I'm saying? You see where that divide happens, where the public is like, what are you thinking?
Right.
Not you
Right.
personally, but
No, I understand.
as we watch what happens, we're like, oh man, if I even looked at a police officer wrong or put my hands on a cop, I'm going to jail immediately.
Sure.
And that doesn't seem like a fair divide as to how we react to one another.
I agree 100%.
Do you want to go out here so she can?
Sure.
It sounds like she's trying to have a call with. It said jail phone. I assume that meant like if somebody wanted to talk to an inmate.
Yep.
And I don't want to interrupt if she's only got a limited time to visit with somebody she loves. But you can see where that divide gets created. And we want to close it.
I do. And with respect to investigating your own officers, for my agency, and I can't say that this is standard practice across the board, but in my agency and most of the agencies that I'm aware of, we'll conduct like an administrative investigation. Let's say an officer is accused of excessive use of force. We, as the employer of this officer, we're going to conduct an investigation, an administrative investigation. This is not a criminal investigation. It's strictly about whether or not they violated policy. If the it's going to depend on various situations, but let's say this is we're talking there was injuries to the the arrested party. We would continue to do our administrative investigation. That's more of a human resources HR kind of thing. We would probably reach out to the sheriff's office, Montana Division of Criminal Investigation, even a neighboring police department or sheriff's office.
Some kind of outside entity.
And request them to do a separate criminal investigation. And that's what we've done historically in the past. Criminal is somebody else. That way there is that separation. They can say, well, this, in this situation, Joe Citizen would have been arrested. And you guys investigated your own and he didn't get arrested. We can say, look, another entity is investigating this. If they feel that there's probable cause for an arrest, they will do that. It's not going to be us. We want to be impartial and independent.
Right.
As far as the administrative investigation, what we can do is, like, if they violated policy and it was a gross violation of policy, a willful act, one of these things, we can then, that gives us the ammunition, so to speak, to terminate that officer from our employment.
Right.
But it wouldn't have anything to do with criminal consequences. We would have a separate agency do that. Should that be the standard? I think so, yes. For the very reasons that you enumerated. In the court of public opinion, if the cops are always policing themselves completely, that does little to engender trust. And that's also why I think the post councils, every state in the union has a post council.
What is a post council?
So
whether I know or not, sometimes I like an explanation for my audience so they understand.
It used to be Peace Officer Standards and Training.
Oh, okay.
POST.
Mm-hmm.
Now because dispatchers are public safety officers, that detention officers, probation and parole, police and sheriff, highway patrol, we all fall under that. And so they changed the name to Public Safety, at least in Montana.
Okay.
Public Safety Standards and Training Council. We still call it POST though. Mm-hmm. And they have an executive director in Helena. They have some staff. It's at the Montana Law Enforcement Academy. They have office space there. POST is who issues our certificate. they have issued a certificate to Mark Kraft to be a peace officer.
Right, they've done the background check. When you graduate from an academy, I'm sure you have to get that.
Even before we, the employing agencies do background investigations. That's part of the requirements as enumerated in Montana Code Annotated. Have to have a background investigation, one of the requirements. But post, so let's say an officer is accused of use of unlawful use of force.
Right.
And then the employing agency does an administrative investigation, the neighboring agency does a criminal investigation. All that information still gets transmitted to Post. Post can do their own investigation and say, this officer's conduct violated our code of ethics, and so we're going to revoke his certification, which means he can't be a peace officer in Montana anywhere. He can't go to the neighboring jurisdiction and get a job as a cop in the next town over. And in fact, nowadays, there is a national clearinghouse that anytime we hire somebody, we run their name through this clearinghouse, and it checks all the post councils in all the states to find out if this person had their certification revoked in South Carolina. If they were revoked in South Carolina,
because there's a lot of law enforcement officers that either quit, they've done something wrong, and then the department gives them the chance to just resign because they don't want the black mark on them.
correct.
Whether it's on him
Correct.
or not,
And
and then he moves down the road to the next department because that department didn't want the black mark on themselves, so they let him just resign and move on,
And
rather than getting fired.
personally, I think that shows a weakness of character on the employing agency. Like, hey, the agency didn't make the mistake, this employee made the mistake. Terminate them, be open and honest about it, because if that guy goes down the road and does something even worse, guess what? It's going to come back and get you.
Right.
So I believe as a profession, we're moving that direction in trying to be as absolutely transparent as possible, eliminating the bad actors and making sure that those bad actors don't continue their bad acts somewhere else. Anyways.
And good law enforcement out there, because on my channel, what I do, and we are not anti-cop, not by a long shot. There are people I still love very dearly and wear that badge to this day.
Sure.
But we are pro our rights and anti-bad policing. That's kind of where it comes into.
Absolutely.
And most good law enforcement actually like what we do because we help expose bad actors, as you put it.
For sure.
And then you get them out of your way, because this guy over here, I may have the patience to say, hey, I had a cop do something horrible yesterday, but you're not him, so I'm not going to base my opinion of you on that bad person.
Sure.
But there are a lot of people who do. They may only have very, very 2 or 3 encounters with law enforcement in their whole life. And so this bad actor that they encountered, they now carry that imagery of law enforcement to everyone they meet wearing a badge.
For sure.
And that's not good for those of you who are doing the right thing.
Absolutely.
And do want to uphold our constitutional rights, and you're trying to be a part of the community and close that gap. That is the worst thing. That's the most dangerous thing to you as a bad cop.
Yeah.
That is the most dangerous thing to any good law enforcement officer.
Absolutely.
And so we end up going out there and holding them accountable. And nowadays, with this grassroots movement sort of accountability, there's cameras everywhere. It's not just our cameras, there's cameras everywhere. And that camera right there, if I wanted to, I can FOIA request what's on it for the last 3 hours and get every single piece of it. A lot of people don't realize that.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know that these cameras, they think, oh, it's just secure inside. No, it's not, it's public.
Right.
Anybody can make a FOIA request and get everything on that camera for days and months.
You're fine.
Yeah, sorry. But, so I've been a CDL holder for many years, 20 years now, and worked in that industry on different levels at different times. I'm held to a higher standard, to the point where if you get into a car accident and you're just an average general motoring public person with a standard license, the question is, did you cause the accident? And if I have a CDL, the question is, could I have avoided it? Mm-hmm. I'm actually responsible to have avoided other knuckleheads. You're held to a higher standard.
Sure. And
law enforcement should also be held to a higher standard in their profession.
Absolutely.
You literally are put in a uniform and sent out there with the authority and ability to take people's money, freedom, and up to and including their life if necessary.
Absolutely.
That's something to take seriously. And I'm hoping that this thought will strike you. How much constitutional training have your officers had? How many of your officers can you ask? The first 10 amendments are the Bill of Rights. Of course, we all know the third doesn't really apply unless we're in domestic war. But how many of them can tell you what the first 10 even mean?
Sure.
And every single day of their life, that is exactly the standard nationwide where every law must pass that bar.
Sure.
If it's a law that doesn't pass the bar of the Constitution, it's unlawful. It doesn't belong in there. And that is the number one job they're doing every time they step out there into the community every day. And how many of them, we as the people, can look at you and go, okay, well, you're here to protect my rights and you're going to do the right thing. But you can't even tell me what my rights are.
Sure.
You don't even know what my rights are. How could you promise me that you're trying to do the right thing? So how much constitutional training do your officers have? And maybe if that thought, and I'm not even asking you to answer it, if that thought is not enough, maybe we should have more.
Sure.
There's another guy who does what I do, and I kind of aspire to get to his level. I'm not that big of a channel. I mean, I'm big enough, but not that big. He's actually been, do you follow First Amendment auditors?
I don't know.
I'm not. I'm a constitutional auditor because I focus on a lot of things. I actually started out focusing on the Second Amendment, but you got to be first in order to know how to record and where you can and not.
For sure.
Long Island audit. That guy has been invited into police departments to assist with teaching law enforcement constitutional rights.
Sure.
Because he's so good at what he does. And that doesn't mean even that he's the professor of it in knowledge. I mean, he is. He's good, and I have a lot of knowledge myself. But I aspire to one day that I'll get to his level, to that point where I could actually be invited in to assist. Because some departments are, in your position as leadership, going to go, yeah, you know what, in the academy, what'd you learn in the academy about the Constitution? You learned a whole lot of hand-to-hand combat, self-defense, how to handcuff somebody, and then when you were thrown into the department in the passenger seat with another cop, you taught how to write out your tickets, you taught how to write out your reports, what to and not to. At what point are you taught the constitutional rights that's the number one foundation of your job?
Sure.
And I know that training goes on beyond the academy. I'm very aware of what happens.
For sure.
But it's very hard to find any constitutional training in it, and that's the foundation of the whole job. And I think that a community that watches their law enforcement do that, for one, law enforcement officers out there are going to start changing some of the things they do and see. And it's not because they're bad people and now they're good people. They were good people to begin with. They just didn't know any better. Mm-hmm. I've ran into several law enforcement officers on every level, including FBI, that they just didn't have the training.
Yeah.
And once they knew and realized and got educated, they were like, yeah, you know what? There's things I shouldn't be doing.
Sure.
Because they are good people and they do mean to do the right thing. They just ain't been educated. But in the last year, how many hours of specifically constitutional training has your department had?
Specifically constitutional training?
Usually the answer is zero.
Department-wide, I'd probably have to say zero.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of, you know, at the academy, there's obviously, you know, a block on constitutional law. But you're right, the focus is more on police procedure that is governed by, you know, the Constitution, but is not, you know, they're trying to cover that police procedure and not necessarily following it back to its root, like, you know, this is a Fourth Amendment, usually Fourth Amendment, that's pretty easy. Mm-hmm. But, for example, you know, interacting with citizens who are recording.
Right.
And understanding that, you know, in public space,
yeah,
they're good to go.
And that's getting a lot better.
It's getting better. I've seen videos that are horrifying, and I'm like,
oh yeah.
I wish you guys would have just watched the 1 hour, you know, webinar video that training that you know is out there.
There's officers that still literally walk right up to us and put their hands on us, start arresting us because we have a camera in our hand.
Right.
Like literally just without any conversation.
Yeah.
And clearly I'm capable of articulating a polite conversation.
Sure.
But even somebody like me, those literally because I have a camera, or they don't like it that I'm wearing a mask. You know, they think that for whatever reason it makes them suspicious of me because of my camera and my mask.
Sure.
Well, there's no law about that though.
Right.
It's perfectly lawful. And the truth is, I'm not secreting who I am. If you wanted to, you'd figure it out eventually. But the idea is, in the public, there is no expectation of privacy. If you want privacy, you have to create it.
Right.
Or it may be my religion. There are people who have a religion that they will not show you their face. They won't even show you as much as I'm showing you, and it's their religion.
Sure.
You know, but you can't ask people to disrobe because you don't like it. And that is kind of a lesson in our constitutional rights that we all need to learn.
Sure.
You know.
But to kind of get back to answer the question, you know.
I'm a talker. That's why I'm good at this.
That's fine.
Because I love to talk.
No problem. You know, the training that goes on after the academy, again, that's going to be usually subject specific in some area of police procedure. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, I mean, I know of trainings that have gone on around the area that are specific, you know, Fourth Amendment refresher or advanced search and seizure. Like this is exploring police procedure kind of on the fringes of what law enforcement normally deal with. Mm-hmm. And you know where these boundaries are. You know, Fourth Amendment is huge. I mean, obviously, use of force, search and seizure. That's kind of the bread and butter. So they should be pretty well versed in that. But ultimately, the training is mostly on procedure that has a nexus back to the Constitution. Where I think, and I think you're right. I think some of the failure is providing adequate training to connect. Why you're doing this one thing, this officer is doing this, you know, this part of police procedure, how that connects directly back to the Constitution. I think that officers should be articulate with why they're doing it, why they're doing something, and what part of the Constitution they are, you know, operating under.
Oh yeah, RAS is literally the minimum of them.
Yeah.
Committing to an encounter that may be a detention. RAS is the very, very bottom minimum that they have to have. So the articulable part, I've heard other departments and officers try to say, well, it's reasonable suspicion RS, and they drop that A out. I know it's a horrible word to say, and ironically it means to articulate something. It's like trying to say Worcestershire to say articulable. Everybody hates that word.
Yep.
But it has to be there because you do have to articulate it to me. Now, granted that we're having a peaceful conversation and you're approaching me and you're saying, well, I need to detain you for a minute, and there's nothing violent or hostile, nobody's upset, you know, and you say, well, I need to detain you, I need you to stay here for a minute. I'm like, okay, can you articulate why? And we're having just a peaceful conversation. You are detaining me because you got to look up something. But you do have to be able to articulate to me why you're asking me to be detained and stay here and follow your lawful
You're
order.
100% correct. It can't be a hunch. It can't be just because I feel like it.
Yeah, I don't like what I see.
Correct. It has to be some sort of articulatable fact. That's what we use that word quite a bit in our department. Articulatable fact.
Yeah, I hate that word too.
It's hard.
Ironically, it means to articulate.
Right. But it has to be something concrete.
Yeah.
Or a series of things that lead that officer to believe that.
Mm-hmm. And that's just to detain somebody without handcuffs even.
Correct.
To the point of handcuffing someone and even arresting them, that rises to the level of PC now. That's a whole different level. But you do have to be able to articulate what that law is. And as long as someone is not a threat and not, you know, a lot of times an officer might be angry at the moment because he doesn't like the situation, he or she is. Mm-hmm. And then they'll say, oh, well, now I'm going to detain you in cuffs. And it's like, wait, I got to do something that's like a threat or violent. Or at least be saying something that would...
Or there has to be an articulable fact that leads the officer to believe that the person is armed.
Right. Somebody told you. Now, that's a big one, though. And this is why I want people to start learning constitutional rights, because the mere presence of a weapon is not a crime, and no one should be putting their... And I'm talking about me now. I'll tell you, for me. You don't put your hands on me when I have a weapon on me. I don't now because this is a courthouse and I can't do that. But in my normal daily life, I wear a weapon on me at all times.
Sure.
Okay, I am from the state of North Dakota, and I have property here, and I go back and forth between Montana and North Dakota.
Sure.
But I've had a Class 1 concealed weapons license, and still an officer approaches me on a traffic stop, literally speeding ticket, traffic stop, and I let him know. And in North Dakota is not a need to inform state. You do not have to inform the officer, but I do out of courtesy. I'll say, hey, I have 2 weapons on me. This literally happened, this exact scenario. I had my Kimber 45 on my hip, and I had my Ruger 380 LCP on my ankle. And I told them. I was on my motorcycle, and I'm standing there in front of him with my hands, just like this. And I said, sir, I just want to let you know I have a concealed weapons permit, and I do have 2 weapons on me, just to let you know. You know what he did? He took both of my weapons off of me. Are you kidding me? Now, I'm not going to resist anything with an officer, because that is not the moment. It's going to end bad and real ugly for everybody, but that he had no right to touch me.
I agree 100%.
He should not have touched my weapons.
Prior to being in law enforcement, I would do the same thing. If I got pulled over, which I hadn't been pulled over before, and I had a concealed weapon on me, and I had a permit, I'd hand them my permit, and they're like, what's this? I said, it's my concealed weapons permit. I am armed. And I fortunately never had a bad encounter.
Right.
But I can absolutely see where an officer,
Yeah, why are you
not
disarming
knowing
me?
exactly what he should be doing, takes it too far.
Yeah, you shouldn't be touching me. I mean, and obviously, I'm just as calm and polite as I am with you at the moment.
Sure.
No drugs or alcohol involved. It's just a speeding ticket.
Yep.
It was me and she's my wife now. My girlfriend at the time, we were just hot rodding on our Harleys. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, you got me. I was being a knucklehead.
Sure.
But that's all it is. It's just a traffic citation. There's nothing bad going on here.
Right.
And I'm being honest with you when I don't have to.
Exactly.
Do you think the next time I encounter a law enforcement officer, then now I'm going to tell him? Oh, hell no.
Yeah.
The answer is hell no. Because I'm not going to give you the opportunity to put your damn hands on me, because I am not going to have my weapons taken off of me.
Sure.
That's just...
Sure.
How would you feel about somebody putting their hands on you in any shape, way, or form if they don't have the lawful reason to? Now, mind you, I've commended people who put their hands on me when they did it appropriately for the right reasons, and that was their job.
Yeah.
So I'm not even anti that happening.
Sure.
But when you put your hands on me when you had no lawful reason to, yes, that makes me angry.
Sure.
And it should make anyone angry.
Absolutely.
You have no right to put your hands on me. So to my concluding, I appreciate you spending all this time with us. And I say us, my audience, we call them our family, it becomes a thing. If I were to walk up to one of your law enforcement officers on the street, they wear body cams, right?
They do. Yep.
Almost all, but there are still some departments that don't, just a little side note, so that's why I asked. And politely, calmly, but your officer came into my home, which is the privacy of my own home, and he had his body cam on, and I said, sir, I just really wouldn't like you to run that, and I took it off his chest and set it on the table. What do you think is going to happen?
You're probably going to get put in handcuffs.
Yeah, immediately.
Yeah.
So does any officer have the right to walk up to me and put his hands on my camera and take it out of my hand?
Right.
No, you don't. You have no right to put your hands on anyone, and I wouldn't do it to you.
Yep.
There's no way. And I'm in the privacy of my own home. And if officers, when it comes to recording, would get the concept of, you wear body cams everywhere you go, you are literally recording and documenting some of the worst moments of people's lives that they will ever see in their whole life.
Right.
And that footage is public review. Anyone can FOIA request it, unless it's currently involved in a trial. But as soon as that's over, then it becomes public review anyway. You can FOIA request it. Anyone in the world anyone in the country, I should say, not in the world, but anyone who's a U.S. citizen can watch every single part of that footage of even people's private, personal interactions with law enforcement in their own homes, and they don't even realize how public that conversation really is.
Sure.
But yet my camera has less reach than that, because the public can't request it. That can only go where I put it.
Sure.
You can't. Everyone doesn't have access to what I'm doing. So why are law enforcement so offended by those of us who do go out and record? Or, like if they're on a traffic stop and you're standing, not reasonably, I'm at least 10 to 15 feet away, you know what I mean? You don't want to get in anybody's personal space. But I've literally seen people stand 10 to 15 feet away, silently standing there, and one of the officers will turn and, you need to get back and get away from us, blah, blah, and you're now hindering government, You've seen it if you've watched any of these.
Yep.
And it's like, why? Why are you doing that? this is a law-abiding citizen who's not bothering you. They have a weapon of mass accountability. That's all they got.
Sure.
You know what I mean? A lot of them, it's in the summer, they're in a t-shirt. I could turn around and look at them and you could see that they don't have, a hip holster on or anything. And yeah, somebody can hide a weapon, but clearly the guy's standing there like this with a lot of them are with a phone, They're literally both hands up here just standing there. Why? Why do you have to go attack them? And I hope your officers don't do that. It sounds like you have the right mentality for this, that you're teaching your officers a better mentality than that. And I hope that's true here in Sidney.
Well, one of the first things every officer does when we onboard them is some First Amendment training. It's an online training segment that they take, and it does cover citizens recording in public places. So.
Well, people call themselves auditors, call themselves cop watchers. There's a lot of different media out there. Here's what I'd like to do, and I'm going to part ways with you because I know you got a job to do, and I actually have a couple more stops that I want to get today before business is closed.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's only 2:30, so I still got time. If you give me a card with your email on it,
sure.
Okay, I will email you, and how about in 30 days from now we get back together, and I'd like to know if anything changed on your part in training, or if you look up, whether or not you have qualified immunity in this state anymore. Maybe get back together and revisit this. Would that be okay with you?
Sure.
Okay. Do you have a card with your email on it?
Let me go grab one out of my office.
Yeah, I'd appreciate it. Yeah, it's good. Thanks, sir.
Betcha.
Yeah, and I will, like I said, I'll email you. And 30 days, 60 days, whatever's comfortable for you. Because I have a feeling, I'm hoping anyways, that based on this conversation, that maybe some things will change.
Well, just the fact that you're, talking about specific constitutional law, I think that is something that we should look at. And so I'll take a look at our training.
This is your direct email, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and if you like, I'll email you a copy of the video when I'm done with it too.
Sure.
I don't mind.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, again, we're not.
Are you on YouTube?
Yes, that's my primary channel where I started, and I'll email you, like I said, a copy of the video.
Perfect. And
get in touch with you so that you can. It'll come from WTP 2 Arms Auditing. That's the email that I use, which is We the People 2 Arms Auditing.
Sure.
And I'll email you and this video for one, but then maybe who knows? A lot of the community that wants to see it, because anytime you're going to type up Sidney, Montana. I keyword that. All my videos are keyworded to the city and state they're in, so anybody who wants to see it is gonna.
Sure.
And I don't know, it's 50,000 views, it's a lot.
Sure.
And so those people might want to see the follow-up of, did something change in our community? Is our law enforcement of that mentality of, we're in an ever-learning state of operating and wanting to improve our relationship with our community. And I would love to give you the opportunity and Sidney the opportunity to know that and start closing that gap. That is the goal.
Sure.
Is to close that gap between community and law enforcement. Because for reasons that have nothing to do with you and me standing here, for the last decade or more, I've watched it grow bigger and bigger and bigger, and I'm sure you've seen it too.
Yeah.
And that's why you have a hard time with hiring and maintaining officers. Is honestly, like when I was a kid back in the 90s, it was like every kid wanted to be either a fireman or a cop or or military or whatever, and it seems like that's changed.
Yeah.
You ask kids what they want to be, you don't hear that as often, and that concept's changing.
Right.
And why can't we get back to that? Why can't we close that gap and start having communities that operate properly together? And they have respect for one another. And on our side, we need to respect the law enforcement officers that we run into, because you can't be F you and blah, 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 okay? That's not going to create a good mentality for the people wearing the badge, but also people wearing that badge have to earn it and show us. You are here to protect our rights, and you will do whatever you can to make sure you're not here to do damage to my life intentionally, because that's what people see it as. As soon as, one of the sayings that I've heard other people say is, don't call the cops because they can make any situation worse. Don't ever call the cops because that's all they'll do is make it worse. And in some scenarios, it's true, because they show up and end up arresting the guy that called them. You know what I mean? But that doesn't mean that Sidney has to operate that way. And it sounds to me like you don't want it to operate that way, and you want a better community relationship.
Absolutely.
All right, well, thank you for your time, sir.
Paul, appreciate your
I
time.
genuinely appreciate it.
You have a good rest of your day. Oh,
Last thought I'm gonna leave you with.
sure.
I don't know if I will or not in this case, but I have before. I had one particular department that I had real good cause to believe they wanted to know who I was, because law enforcement, it's like crack, man. They want that ID. They want it. And so what they did was they watched me walk out to my car and got a plate number and ran it. I had a friend, that way they still didn't know who I was, and I'm already 2 steps ahead of you anyway, trust me. It's actually a misdemeanor crime for you to investigate a law-abiding citizen. Did you know that?
Yeah. Yeah, unless
So if I have someone FOIA request the communications in this department, and I find that someone nabbed my plate to try and identify who I was. Now here's the truth, in the end, if you and I continue this relationship,
Sure.
and it progresses the way I see it progressing so far in this conversation, you'll know who I am. I'll tell you who I am. I have no reason to secret myself.
Yeah.
I am a law-abiding citizen. But it's part of building that trust
Sure.
and seeing what the relationship looks like. You know what I mean? What kind of integrity are we going to have here between us?
Sure.
What are you really doing? So I may do that. I haven't decided yet. I'm going to ask my wife and let her roll the dice and decide on this one.
Okay.
I didn't file charges against the one department, but I did come and confront them with it later. And I confronted them with the fact that that is a crime. And technically you could go to jail. I think it's like a 30-day thing, like up to 30 days and up to $1,500 fine. That's in North Dakota. I don't know.
Sure.
What is it here? Do you know?
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, I don't know what, I know it's a misdemeanor, but it is technically a crime to investigate a law-abiding citizen that you don't have criminal actions to justify you are investigating that person. And and that's where I was just about to leave. That's why I crossed my mind. So I'm like, I'm about to walk out to my car, and I'm wondering who's going to try and grab my plate.
No. I don't know. I want to go to lunch. So
Yeah.
that's what
All right. Yeah. I'm sorry. I
all-
really do
it's all
appreciate
right.
you taking all this time.
No, it's-
I know
it's cool.
I know you got things to do, including lunch, and that's valid for you to want to have a lunch. What? You haven't gone to lunch already?
No.
At 2? I don't eat during the day, honestly. I only eat dinner usually, and I know that that's horribly unhealthy for me, but.
Well, I'm kind of there too. I always end up working through lunch and then eating late afternoons.
Yeah, but I can't thank you enough for all the time you spent here with us
No
today.
problem, Paul.
You have a
good
great
one.
day.
You as well.
All right, Two Arms fam, we've had one heck of a conversation here with the chief, and we appreciate him spending all that time with us, but I'll disseminate this conversation and see what the public opinion is. You know, court of public opinion, let's see what you guys have to say about this conversation, you know, what we could have discussed, what I might have missed. Given the opportunity to talk to the chief of a department, I definitely wanted to take advantage of that and ask as many questions and have as much conversation as I could. So hopefully this was as good for you folks as it was for me. I really enjoyed this conversation actually, and I think it enlightened a lot of things, and we may even be making a positive change in Sidney, or at least we can't make that change, but we're at least getting to be a part of it. You know, it's up to the chief and it's up to his officers and it's up to all of them to actually make the change. But at least we get to be a part of it. We might have been the spark that ignited that fire and might develop a better law enforcement presence in their community. Let's see what happens. Well, thanks for coming along, and you folks stay safe out there.
Hey, Two Arms fam. Glad to see you made it here to the end. Man, that was a great conversation. I genuinely hope that you folks enjoyed watching it just as much as I enjoyed having that conversation. The chief definitely had a good position on wanting to learn more, wanting to educate his officers more, wanting to implement more training about the Constitution and our rights. That is a beautiful hope for our future with closing that divide between we the people and our law enforcement. Let's hope we can close that gap. We will follow up with the chief to see that he has implemented some kind of training and, you know, what new things are coming in his department. And we'll also get our feet out on the street and encounter some of his law enforcement in practice, you know, in traffic stops and other situations where we might encounter them out in the community. And let's hope that this is a great story of a good community of law enforcement. Don't forget, folks, like, share, and subscribe so that we can spread the love and the education everywhere. For fun and for free education. Anyways, don't forget, folks, stay safe out there.
Hi everyone, I'm your best friend, back in town again.